Alright, so in this video what I'm going to do is cover off how we reference objects from one collection to another. So what I'm going to demonstrate is how to map a reference to a supplier object from the products table. So the first thing I'm going to do is create the products table, and then from a product object, product class, I'm going to reference a supplier. So let's have a quick look at the database, I guess, just to get started. So if we have a look at the Northwind database, and to look at the products table. So we've got obviously some products here, and we're referencing the supplier. So we've already set the supplier classes up as per the previous videos. So they're fairly simple at this point. And we'll map this products table now. So we've got a couple of classes to create. So we're going to create the products class, which is going to represent the table, and I'm going to inherit from DatabaseObjects generic. I'm going to use the keyed because we have a key field, which is going to be the product code. So it's going to be of type product, and the key field is type string. Let's create that class. Okay, so the couple of things we need to set up is the table. So it's mapping to the products table. And we also need to set up the distinct field, which is the product ID column. And it is actually an auto incrementing field. Okay. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is set up the constructor. So I'm going to pass through the database so we know what database we're actually using and where this database data should be sourced from. And we should probably also set up this key field as the product code. Let's just double check that's right. Oh no, sorry, it's product name. Product name. And so this key field will be used for a couple of functions. There's an exist function, and there's also get an item by the key field name. So if we hop back through to the product main application, products, new products, pass through the database. So the products will have a couple of functions, and this is one of them. So if I pass through the So I'm going to get the child product if I do that, and the other function it provides is an exist function as well, where you can set up pass through the so that would return true. So these two functions I think are the only ones that really use that key field, but this sort of concept applies for a lot of the setup. So as another example, we can set up a subset function, and there is actually an attribute for that, but that's used only for master detail relationships. So if we want to do a bit of something a little bit different to that, we can set up a subset this way. If we go over to the products table, you can see that there's actually a discontinued field in here. So what we want to do is really just only include the ones where it's false. We're not interested in discontinued products. So we can set up a subset, and this subset will apply to everything. Almost all the functions in this class. So if we, for example, if we're going to enumerate through the list, it will apply the subset. If we're going to get an object by a key, it will apply the subset as well. So it's only going to be within that subset. If we get a count of the number of objects in this collection, it'll only be the count within this subset. So that's a really good way of consolidating that kind of filtering into one spot. So in this situation, we just want to filter by that discontinued field, and let's just set up conditions. This SQL conditions, there's a whole heap of things you can do with it, which I'll go into in another video, but for the moment I'll just stick to something fairly simple. So condition equal to, so just make this a bit clearer, condition is equal to false, and return that condition. You can actually concatenate conditions together. You can use expressions. There's lots of different things we can do, but like I said, I'll cover that off in another video. So for the moment, that will suffice, and we can basically, that'll filter it down to just the active products. Okay. So I'm just going to prove that out. Products. And just write this product out. We do actually need to set this product class as well, which I've forgotten about. So let's inherit from DatabaseObjects, and we can set up. We'll just map a couple of fields. I think product name should suffice. And all we need to do is set up the field mapping. And let's also map out the price as well. I think it's called unit price. Okay. And we just need to set up the constructor. Let's pass through the main collection. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. So we should be able to dump out the product name. Okay, so we've got an issue with the condition. Condition equals 0. I obviously haven't typed that correctly. Discontinued. When there's an SQL error, that actually will dump out the inner exception as well. So none of that sort of important SQL information is lost. Okay, so we're filtering it down by discontinued equals 0. And it's not ordered, looks a bit messy. Let's add in some ordering as well while we're at it, but that's looking okay. So to add in ordering, all we need to do is just chuck on an attribute here, order by, and we want to order it by product name. So that'll be ascending order by default. You can actually apply subordering here as well. So if we wanted to order it by something else as well, we can put in another order by there too. But that'll do for the moment. Great. So we can see that it should have ordered it by the top there. Great, so we've got our products class set up, and we can set up a root object which will sort of allow us to easily access all the other collections in the model. So I'm going to set up a north wind model, and I'm going to inherit from a class called root container. And this actually just contains a database as well, so this can be substituted essentially as a database. So we're going to set up a property get the suppliers, and I'm also going to set up the products constructor. We need the database. Just pass that down. Suppliers equals new suppliers. And what we need to do is actually change this to pass through the root container, so we can just make this Northwind model. That'll hook into that, and change the products to the model as well. So this is what I mean by it essentially can be substituted as instead of the database, but there's really just a couple of overrides for that. Okay, so let's set up the products. Okay, this is the model. Okay, so if we go back to the application, set up a new model. Pass through the database. Okay, so from the model we can now access our products. We should actually call this active products because it's not including the discontinued products. Okay, so this should be working as it was before, and now what I want to do is from the supplier class, from the product class, reference the supplier as well. So what you can do is you can set up just a property, a private property, which passes through the supplier ID. So it's the same concept as this really. So let's pass through the supplier ID. And this is going to be the supplier ID that we're going to get through from the database. So what we want to do here is just load up the supplier. So I'm going to have a just make it read-only for the moment. And this supplier then can be set from the supplier ID. So this is where the root object comes into play. So we can do base root container multi-win model, and then get our suppliers collection, and we want to get it by ID. Now we don't have a function for that. So this will, what we want it to do is return an object based on the ID. Distinct field is the ID, supplier ID is a distinct field, so we can use the base.object, and just let's call this supplier ID, just make it a bit clearer. Okay, so now we're essentially going to get that supplier ID. So every time this product loads, it will set the supplier ID, and then from that we can then just load the supplier. This is not obviously very optimal, but I'll go into that in a minute. So let's just run that. Actually, before we do that, we should actually dump out the supplier name. Let's just hop back to here. So we've got the product. Let's dump out supplier. Company name. Let's give that a go. Okay, so you can see here that it's run this first statement, which has gotten all of the objects, and then for each object it's loaded supplier. So this is not optimal, but it does work. It does work. So you can see here we've got the product and supplier. Okay, so the next thing, there's a couple of options about optimizing this, because you don't want to hammer the database if you don't need to. You could just, if you're doing this in SQL, you just join the tables together and get it in one big hit. So there's a couple of options. One is to delay the loading of the object, and that's what I'm going to show you now. And the second option is to actually do some table joins and then just get in one hit. So anyway, let's assume that we're enumerating through the products, but we don't actually need the supplier information at this stage. So it might be a search screen. On the search screen we don't show the supplier, so it doesn't really matter. So we're doing something effectively like this. We're just dumping out the product specific fields. So if this is the case, then we don't actually need to load the supplier every time. We can just load it when we need it. If we hop over to the product class, what we can do is we can set up what's called an object reference. So it's just a way of lazily loading the object. So to do that, I'm going to create an object reference. Generic one, object reference, of type supplier. I'm just going to call the supplier reference. Okay, so in the constructor we can set up we can pass through the collection that it's actually associated with. So this is basically the suppliers table. So we can just grab this. Okay, so what this will do is, and we can just get rid of this for the moment. Okay, so basically the way this works is that the supplier reference will be passed through the supplier ID when this product is loaded, but it won't actually load the supplier object until it's explicitly called. So there's an object property on that. So if we go back to here and we call let's make that supplier public just for the moment. So there's an object property on here, and this, when that is called, will actually load the supplier. So this is going to essentially do the same thing, right? But it gives us the flexibility to load it on demand. Alright, so that would effectively do the same thing as what we were doing before. But if we're not doing that, let's just load that like that. Okay. So if we run this now, it won't actually load those suppliers until we're actually calling it. Okay, great. That was a lot faster. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, this is obviously a little bit ugly. We want to wrap that up a little bit in a supplier property. So let's return the supplier reference object. Make that private. Oh, that's already private. So, okay, so now we've wrapped it up. It's essentially as it was before, except that now that we've got support for lazy loading. Okay, so again, that should run fairly quickly because we're not actually pulling that down. Great, and if we include that, we should still see that being loaded. But you see now it's interspersed because we've got it loading on demand. So we can see here it's loaded the product, then we've called supplier, and now it's going, okay, I need to get the supplier and get that name. Okay, so sometimes that situation doesn't always apply where we want to load the object lazily. We always want to get that supplier field from the product. So there's another way where you can essentially table join the tables and get the result and extract the objects from that result. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate now. If we go back to the products table, we can override the table joins. Okay, so this can be overridden to do anything really. Obviously its primary purpose is to just get rid of all these guys here, make it a bit readable. So every time this products class is enumerated or loaded in some way, it'll always join it with with any other table. In this case, we want to join it with the supplier table. Okay, so I want to create a join with the suppliers table. So let's just do that. Table joins, I think it is. So we can specify the left table and the right table, how they're joined. So the left table, this primary table will be the products table. And we want to inner join it with another table, suppliers table. So we just add a tables add. This tables add will not really do anything. It's just going to create an object called supplier that we can then reference. So let's join those two together, suppliers table. And on the join, we want it where the supplier ID on the left table, which is supplier, which is the products table, is equal to supplier ID in the supplier table. And let's return that. Okay, so that's going to return the table join. So let's just go back and run that. Okay, so let's have a look at this exception. Okay, got an invalid table name, suppliers. So go back to here, call it suppliers. Try that again. Okay, great. So you can see here it's joined it for us, done it in a join for us. And of course we're not really taking advantage of that here, so now that's what I'm going to do. So what we can do is we can override the loading of the product class. So there's two functions that are used to sort of serialize and deserialize a product. And so if we override the load fields function, keep the old loading there, but what we want to do is we don't want to use the object reference. We'll just comment that out for the moment. We'll use this. Let's comment that out for the moment. Okay, so at this point, this collection of fields here will actually contain all of the products fields and the supplier fields as well. So we can essentially just load the supplier from that. Oops. Getting a bit confused here, so I'll just comment that out. Okay, so we should be able to set the supplier just loaded from these fields. So there's a database class which we can use to do that. So we can object load from fields. We need to know the collection, so we can get the collection from the root container. Suppliers, and we need to know the field values. Okay, so now that we've specified that, we should be able to load this object inline without having to go off the database multiple times. What's the error we're getting here? Object from field values. So collection and the field values. There we go. Okay, so if we run that now, we should be able to. Okay, we need to explicitly cast that. Okay, so it's just as fast, and we've taken advantage of this joining of tables. So that's one way you can do it as well. So you can join the tables. Now we can take that a step further and get rid of all this as well. You can just specify attributes on an object, and it will do all this automatically for you. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'll take this. I think we'll still need that, and we still need this. And get rid of this. And all you need to do is to just specify an early binding. Okay, so this is a real time saver. So this will go through all the references and find all of the reference types from this. So this only works in certain situations, so please be aware that it doesn't work in all situations, but in most cases it will. And so that'll create the table joins automatically and load the objects when the main object is loaded. So let's just run that, and it must be used with the object reference class. Okay, so you can see here it's done exactly the same thing. It's joined it, and it's figured out the joins from the types that it's referencing. So it knows that this is of type supplier, and it's found the IDs from that and joined it together. So that's a really easy way of doing it. And the advantage of doing that as well is it can work with multiple fields. So we can set up another one called category ID. And we can set up another one here. Okay, so I'm going to hop off and do that now. Okay, so now I've created the categories. I've created the categories table and the category object. And I actually had forgotten to remove this table joins here, so it was actually applying this. So when you're specifying the early binding on these guys here, what it's actually doing is just overriding what the table joins function does. But I hadn't uncommented that, so that was it was actually being applied, but it was still working because it was doing exactly the same thing. So anyway, I'll take that out now, and now we've got it hooked up in the program to dump out the category as well. So if we go back to product, we can see that we're doing the same thing that we're doing for the supplier, we're now doing for the category as well. So that'll just create a reference to the category and we can use that category object. So if we run that now, it'll join those three tables together and we should get some pretty quick output. Okay, so you can see it's done all the joining for us and we're getting objects pretty quickly. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.